talking to for my For what? Because people weren't behaving. Are you shocked? There's like 150 kids in one spot.
Thank you. Alright, so let's talk about this. The most common response that I have here looking is 0.78, comma 25. I have a negative 1, comma 0.78. So let's look at this. Someone did put in infinity. So here's what we need to remember really quickly looking at this. When I am looking for a domain interval of increase, those of us who really put 0.78, comma 25, is that an interval of values? No, what is that? That's a point. Now it's a relative maximum, so that's where the function stopped increasing and started to decrease, right? So tell me where I could highlight or use this marker to show an interval of increase. Is it here? No? Right through here? So that entire thing is an interval of increase. What's here? Okay, so increase, right? So I want to point this out, and this is what you need to be careful about. If you hear most teachers, mathematicians talk about it, all they'll ever say is interval of increase and interval of decrease. That's all they'll say. What other word did I throw in here? Domain. That is because the word domain is implied when people are talking about intervals of increase and decrease. The reason why I will always throw that word domain in there and you want to think about that is, if I'm telling you it's a domain interval, which variables are you going to write about? X. So for those people who wrote negative 1, comma 0.78, is that an interval of x values where the function is increasing?
No.
Where is it? What's the x where it starts increasing? Negative 1. What's the x when it stops increasing? So is that an interval of x values where it's increasing? Very much so. Okay. This is the minimum x value where it starts to increase. This is the maximum x value where it stops increasing. So that would be a good domain interval of increase. Where would be the other domain interval of increase? It starts at that x value of 3.2. Okay. Is it going to positive infinity because this is going up? Say no. Why not, Cole?
Because it's also going
Say it again.
It's also going to right.
Oh. Remember, this is called what kind of interval? Domain interval. The fact that it's going up is why it's increasing, but if it's a domain interval, I'm not writing about the fact that it's going up, I'm writing about the fact that it's going to the right. You need to be careful about this because students in first block already made this mistake. You only are including x values here because they are domain, as a domain interval of increase. So be careful about that. It's a domain interval of increase. Yes? So like, think about it here. This is decreasing, right? So notice the y value right now is positive infinity, isn't it? But if I'm writing the domain interval of decrease, it's decreasing along this entire way. So what is the x value where it starts to decrease? Negative infinity. And then where does it stop decreasing? Does that make sense? And so you have to pay attention to the domain where it is increasing and decreasing. Okay? We're going to get more practice with it, but I just wanted to use that bell ringer as a recap of that detail. One thing to keep in mind is a lot of times we have to worry about whether it's brackets or parentheses on that interval. When I've done all of these interval notations, what have I used every time? Parentheses. Does anyone remember why?
Because they can do everything in between.
There's everything in between, but I mean, like, it could include potentially. So, Deja, what are you thinking? Now, Alexia, Leah, and then I'll add in anything we need to. What do you think, Deja? So I hear that. One of the things to be aware though is this parenthesis is noting that it stops at -1, it can't go any further. The difference is this means that -1 is not included. If a bracket is there, the -1 is included. It's like an open circle versus a closed circle. Okay? Lexi, anything to add on to that?
I remember you saying something about them being able to be matched, or like you can like add a point or something.
Mm-hmm. That's when, so yeah, that's the idea of an open point versus a closed point in general. And I will say this, you have to worry about that for domain and range, but for intervals of increase and decrease, it's always parentheses. And I'll explain why in a second. Aaliyah, do you know anything to add on to it?
I was saying like the color is like everything between those two.
Right, but I'm just focusing on this end, like why is it parentheses? So here's what I want you to pay attention to really quickly. After this function decreases, what does it start to do? Increase, right? So it starts increasing at -1 and it stops at 0.78. If I put a bracket here and a bracket here, what I'm saying is that it is, well, not just that, I'm saying that it's decreasing at -1 and it's increasing at -1. Can it increase and decrease at the same point? No. So we can't use those brackets, and so I'll go ahead and tell you, like, legitimately, I think it was about 3 years ago, I was teaching the idea of intervals of increase and decrease to my pre-cal students that I had then, and I was struggling to figure out when to use brackets or parentheses. And it was by asking that question, well, if I put a bracket here, can I put a bracket here? And the answer is no, you can't increase and decrease there, that I realized something very important. If you pay attention to decreasing, if I draw a line that's kind of approximating it, we call this a tangent line, it touches at one point, what kind of slope does that tangent line have? It has a negative slope, right? If I look at this increasing piece right here, what kind of slope does that have? Positive. So when a function is decreasing, it has a negative slope. When the function is increasing, it has a positive slope. But look at this minimum. If I draw that tangent line right here, what is that slope? 0. So it does not have a positive or a negative slope. It is not increasing or decreasing at that point, so I cannot include that point. That's why you will always use parentheses. So it is not decreasing or increasing at relative max and min, so you will always put parentheses there. Every time. Now, that's only with intervals of increase and decrease that you always put parentheses, okay? But it's again that idea because it is a slope of 0, not a positive or a negative slope. Alright, does that make sense, hopefully? We good with those details? Alright, so let's get to where we actually, before, no, I'll do it in a second. Alright, no, that's geometry. Y'all aren't in geometry. Don't lie to yourself. Oh, I didn't put it in here. So I already had one student reach out, and I get it. This is on me. If you need me to reach out to your parents to let them know that your grade is the way it is because of me, mark that here. And I'll send out a mass text or email to parents today because I, like, legitimately, guys, I was out for 2 weeks. I've been trying to catch up on grades, but it was a Wednesday to the Thursday 2 weeks later. It wasn't 2.5 weeks, but it's close. You're right, the day of the test.
Way to go.
Thank you. But, as I said, it's on me. I will get things caught up. I will get things graded and get them in. It's tough and it's exhausting, but I will get those things in. So I don't want anyone in trouble because of me not being on top of things. I'm going to try to have those tests in. Those tests will replace understanding check grades, things like that, when you've improved. I will also make this note. Someone in my first blog brought it to my attention that I apparently forgot to go in and look at y'all's understanding checks at the end of first 9 weeks based on your midterm. So I'm going to do that. I've already got it approved by Mr. Hinton to go in, and if your grade would increase, like from a B to an A or a C to a B, I'm going to update those understanding check grades to honor that increased level of understanding. So be aware, I messed that up as well, and I will get on it. Having a kid apparently makes you forget things. But I apologize, but I will get it fixed. I will always do right by my students, if at all possible. Okay. So here is where we are. We're going to finish up sections 3 and 4 of that lesson 3, right? So activities 3.3 and 3.4. And then we'll start lesson 4 by the end of class today. We got 8 more minutes to get a little bit done before we go to lunch. So we need to talk about this H and I, and I think we should hopefully be a little bit better on this at this point. Now, I want to emphasize something. Every single group has a box on their desk, right?
Correct.
And there's colored pencils in there. I'm going to update it with colored markers soon. It's underneath Adaja's desk. Okay? No, I don't have pens. If you want pens, you can buy your own pens. So, here's what I want to point out. This is something I legitimately like to do. We have 2 different types of intervals, right? Increase and decrease. I color code mine to make it easier to identify what's happening. For example, what's happening here is, well, also, by the way, don't forget, how do we read graphs?
Left to right.
Always left to right. So I'm going to start here on the left, and what's happening with my function?
Increasing.
Increasing. Notice again, if you draw that tangent line, what kind of slope does it have? Positive, right? So I'm going to use one color on that interval of increase. And I'm going to stop. By the way, have you noticed where we always stop our intervals of increase and decrease?
Climax. So let's go to English.
It's not a climax in math, though. What's it called?
Is
Does it have to be an absolute maximum? Relative max, or it can happen at relative min if we're talking about stopping decrease. So please note, wherever you have an extremum, right? Extrema is plural. If you have an extremum, that's singular. Everywhere you have an extremum, that's going to change your increasing and decreasing. So here it decreases. Oh, I've got a relative min. So now I'm going to increase. And then I'm going to downcrease. Gross, but okay. And then after that, I'm going to increase. And so, unless you have a graphing calculator, it's impossible to get these 100% accurate, but you can estimate. I believe it's 236, Jordan. If that's what you're looking for. M1-236. Okay. So I want to point this out, right? Personally, I'm going to ignore like doing all increasing and all decreasing. I'm just going to read a graph like I read a graph from left to right. So when I start over here, we already said we're what? Increasing. Where does it start to increase? What is it at? Let's say, because I heard -3, but notice it goes to the left of that, right? It's constantly going down and to the left. So it starts increasing from negative infinity all the way out there. Where does it stop increasing?
27.
No, not 27.
2.5.
What do you think?
Negative 2.5. What?
What? Hey, what type of interval is this? So we need what values? X values. This is why, like, most people leave off that word domain. It's understood, but I always write it there. I always remind myself that I want a domain interval, okay? After that domain interval of increase, now we have a domain interval of decrease. Where does it start to decrease now?
Negative 2.5.
Yeah, I was saying, guys, doesn't it start to decrease right where it stopped increasing?
Negative 2.5.
So negative 2.5.
And it goes down to 1.1. Oh my gosh. Oh.
Because remember, it's what kind of interval? Domain interval. Pay attention to your X. Jordan, let's scoot that. Remind me to scoot that group over to the side so it's easier for y'all to see in a second. Okay. What happens after that decrease? Increase. From -1.
0.3.
0.3, 0.25, it's estimating, I'm good with whatever. 0.3. And then where does it start to decrease? 0.3. Not quite 3, I think that's like I'd say 2.3 roughly. And then after that? Okay, we have just a handful of minutes. What I want you to do at this point is I want you to get up, I don't care what board you go to, but I want you to go to a board and I want you to start answering number 13 as a small group. This is where we'll pick back up when you come back from lunch. So let's work together, let's actively collaborate to get number 13 complete.
We are going Where the washcloth at?
Apparently they got moved over to the other side. Number 13.
No, you the chalkboard, Dave. Stop getting on the baby that board. Now we do this right there. Maybe do nothing.
Miss Boyfriend asked me who was sitting behind me. She said, "Is that boy sitting behind me?" They kept laughing the whole. Yes. Where's the? Man, you know who coming.
Oh, yeah.
You see, you do too much. Why you up that high? We have to do it. Cause why there's so many of them. Okay, put it like right there. April, you up that high? Why you up that high?
There's always two
So go ahead and start writing your answers where it's not wet. Let's get started on that, please. Zanny, why are you not with your groups? Come on.
Oh, we just got that.
Alright, let's start answering some questions. We got our letters up there. Huh? Okay.
I think it's negative. Behavior is going on. But it's negative. This one negative. I'm about to take it.
Can y'all hear me that rag over here?
That's for
I should have three of those washcloths. Ours was stolen.
Why you not actually collaborating?
What? Come on, Kirby. Focus on
What is
that.
the question?
Stop trying to instigate things. I know you're an instigator. Everybody knows you're an instigator.
Hey.
6 degree.
Oh, I found them.
No, 6.
Hey, you don't have to draw the graph because it's only going to be right here, and you have it in the book. Yeah. Okay, it is time that we can start heading to lunch. I need y'all to come back ASAP so we can get knocking these out. Man, I need to tell y'all twice to come back quickly.
That's what we say there. No way.
Mr. Kenny,
Yeah,
your bag prompted like 20 people to bring stuff into the box.
say that one more time.
Your bag for the burn victims prompted like 20 people to bring stuff into the box.
Seriously?
It took 6 of us to haul it upstairs.